All right, so the January jobs report is out, and at first glance, wow, the headline is a real banger. I mean, 130,000 new jobs? That's almost double what anyone was calling for. But what if that big, flashy number isn't the real story? We're going to dig in and see what's actually going on under the hood.
So this is the chart everyone's talking about. You can see it right there. The forecast was for a pretty modest 70,000 jobs, but the actual number? A whopping 130,000. I mean, that just blows expectations out of the water. And, your first reaction is, okay, the labor market is on fire. But is it really?
Yeah, that's the simple, happy story, right? But the second you start to peel back the layers and look at the fine print, well, the picture that emerges is a whole lot weaker. A lot more fragile, actually.
And this is where it gets really interesting, because the biggest bombshell in this entire report has nothing to do with January 2026. Nope, it's hidden away in these huge revisions to last year's numbers.
Get ready for this. The Bureau of Labor Statistics just went back and, poof, erased almost 900,000 jobs from the 2025 data. That's right, analysts are calling them ghost jobs, basically jobs that were counted every month, but when they did the final math, turned out to have never really been there.
So what does that mean? It means that whole story about the super strong labor market we heard all last year, well, it was kind of a statistical illusion. We're kicking off 2026 from a much, much weaker starting point than any of us thought.
Okay, so this brings us to the next big question. How on earth can a month where millions of people actually lost their jobs end up being reported as a positive gain? It sounds impossible, right? Well, the answer lies in this quirky little statistical tool called seasonal adjustments.
The best way to think about seasonal adjustments is like they're noise-canceling headphones for economic data. Their whole job is to filter out the predictable ups and downs. The big hiring boom for the holidays and then the inevitable layoffs in January. The idea is to cancel that noise so we can hear the real trend underneath.
But here's the catch. Here's how it can create a total illusion. So follow me on this. Step 1. In the real world, millions of people get laid off after the holidays. Every single year, it's totally normal. So step 2, the government's fancy statistical models predict a huge number of layoffs. But, and this is the key part in step 3, this year, the actual number of layoffs was just a little bit smaller than what the model predicted. It was still a massive loss, just not quite as massive. And because of that tiny difference, the math in step 4 takes that less bad than we thought number and magically turns it into a headline gain of 130,000. It's not real hiring, it's just a math trick.
Okay, so if the headline number is basically a statistical quirk, did we have any real job growth? And when you look for it, you find another major red flag. The growth we did see is incredibly, almost dangerously narrow.
Just look at this chart. It's pretty wild. Of all the jobs gained in the private sector, a jaw-dropping 95%, we're talking 124,000 jobs, came from just one place: healthcare and social assistance. And you got to remember, these are what we call non-cyclical sectors. They aren't really tied to how well the overall economy is doing.
So let that sink in for a second. If you just pull out that one government-funded healthcare sector, what's left? The rest of the private economy, manufacturing, retail, tech, all that stuff, it's basically flat, dead in the water. That is not what broad, healthy growth looks like. It's what a defensive, stagnating economy looks like.
And it's not just us connecting the dots here. This whole weaker, hidden story we're uncovering, it gets backed up when you start looking at other data points that have nothing to do with this report.
For example, take a look at this number. WARN notices. These are the legal papers companies have to file before they do mass layoffs. And in January, these notices spiked to the highest level we've seen since, wait for it, 2009. Yeah, right in the middle of the Great Recession.
There's this great quote from an analyst that just nails it. The government says hiring, but corporate America is screaming firing. And that really sums up the huge disconnect, right? Between the government's math models and what real companies are actually doing. And one last thing. There's this giant growing split between the two different surveys the government uses to get these numbers. You've got the establishment survey. That's the one that counts paychecks from businesses, and it's where we get that nice positive 130,000 number. But then you have the household survey, where they literally call people up and ask, hey, do you have a job? And that survey, it's painting a much, much weaker picture. Right now, the difference between these two stories is millions of jobs wide. And historically, when that happens, one of them is usually dead wrong.
So, what are we supposed to make of all this? Where does it leave us? Well, basically, we're staring at two completely opposite stories about the U.S. labor market.
On one hand, you have the bull case. It's pretty simple. The big headline number was a beat and unemployment is still low. Everything looks stable. But then you've got the bear case, which says, hold on a second, those massive revisions prove we're starting from a weak spot. All the growth is in one tiny corner of the economy. And the headline gain was just a math trick. The takeaway here isn't that the sky is falling, but it's pretty clear the labor market isn't growing. It's stagnating.
So the big question you've got to ask yourself next time you see one of these reports is, are you just reading the headline? Are you looking at the details? Because right now, the headline is telling a story of stability, but the details, they're telling a story of stagnation. And which one of those stories turns out to be true is probably going to define this entire economic year.